Hello, this is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter, coming to you from Akashic Intelligence, the original AI, and Southern Oregon from the Rogue River, where the spirit of the rogue is alive and being healed. I want to say that the land is being healed, and so the people shall follow. Today, we are going to cover again Alice Bailey. As I talked earlier with the group before we went on, I'm seeing renewed interest in this topic. I'm seeing a lot of people begin to embrace the concepts that Bailey had, maybe not the personality of Bailey, but they are looking at some of her methods and what was written in white magic, and seeing that the new science is magic, along with the explanation, as we've seen with Russell, and some of the ideas of wave and waveform mechanics. So as we talk today a bit, we're going to go over Rule 3. And as you know, as I say, we are going to do a little collage to begin with, just to kind of give a visual idea of what we're talking about, so that we can implant some of these images in our mind as we go through, and kind of maybe bring up some thoughts or perceptions that you may have about what we're going to talk about. Again, this is not going to be a deep study into Alice Bailey. We're going to skim the surface, because to go into this book in great detail would take quite a while. And like I said, some of the things that she talks about are not really pertinent today. They were at the time the book was written, but may not be. The book was supposedly from a conversation with a Tibetan monk that she had, that was actually the foundation of this. And so as we go forward, that there's been many other conversations with him and other books written. So let's go ahead and get started with the collage. So this time we're going to talk about Rule 3. And so Rule 3 says the energy circulates, the point of light, the product of labors of the four, waxes and groweth. The myriads gather round its glowing warmth until its light recedes, its fire grows dim, then shall the second sound go forth. And that second sound that we talked about was the Om, the sacred word that we had talked about last week.
What's the first sound?
The first sound is coming from the monad to you, and then you put forth the second sound, which is the Om, to manifest. So within this, we have the first and the second sounds. And so as we talk and go through this, there's quite a few images here. One thing that we're going to talk about is the 7 rays. Now, as up here in the corner, I'm sure people have seen this image, which is from the album Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, which shows the prism here with the ray of light coming in and then turning into the 7 rays of the prism. This album has quite a bit of esoteric symbolism in it and knowledge within the songs that it talks about the dark side of the moon. Many people believe that there are things going on the dark side of the moon that are occult. But again, this is kind of the symbol of that single ray going into a prism and becoming multiple rays. Again, here is kind of an idea of the different rays and the different, there's many concepts of the 7 rays and what bodies they associate with and so on, depending on which philosophy you look at. But they all are pretty much, in regard to the physical plane, the astral plane, the lower mental, the manistic, the buddhic, which is the soul plane, the atmic, the monadic, and the logoic, which is the monad. And the logoic also is in reference to, in the Bible of John's gospel, that in the beginning was the logos, was the word. And so a lot of the Bible comes from the ideas of the logos, which also comes from Plato. So Platonists have a lot to do with the logo. And a lot of what we're talking about here is Platonic. It's going to talk about forms and logos and things like that, which Plato discussed in his writings. One of the things that we're going to look at is Alice Bailey speaks about the idea of why we have where we came from and how long ago that was. And we're talking about billions of years of evolution of man and his body and his personality and his different subtle bodies. And so if we look at this drawing, that was done by Rudolf Steiner, which actually has to do with the four elements of the earth, which, looks at the gnome, so Steiner's very much into the gnomes. And oftentimes, if you take a Steiner education through the Waldorf schools, you will actually look for gnomes and try to communicate with gnomes in your education. Then we have the water element, and we have the fire, the salamander, and we have the air element. So these are all the elements that make up us as we were starting as humans. And we weren't the form we are today. There was evolution of form. We didn't start as an ape, but we did start in a much more etheric body that was much larger and had a different shape, but was still beginning to be formed. And that whole concept is that this body we have today is still being formed. And we are going into an individuation that was stopped at a point because we were not evolving as fast spiritually as we were mentally. And therefore we were becoming unbalanced. And we see that situation today in what we call physical materialists, where they have totally thrown away all spirituality and now are concentrating purely on the physical side and the mental side. And that is actually what Steiner talked about with the Ahrimanic influences. So there was two influences that Steiner spoke about. One was the Luciferic, that just wanted us to be a spirit being and get rid of the body. And then the Ahrimanic wanted us to get rid of the spirit and just become a physical body. So as we are going today, we're beginning to see this bifurcation of these two ideas, that there are those who are wanting to go deeper into matter, to become more materialistic, to believe that, doing things by putting things in my arm, I can actually get healthier. And then we see other that believe that it's all as above, so below, that if we take care of it in the spiritual planes, it will manifest itself in the physical planes. And that's kind of a lot of what our journey is today. So one thing that that Bailey talks about is the idea that the Brotherhood wanted to stop this individualization, and that idea of individualization was actually picked up by Carl Jung, and he called it individuation, right? Where he broke down that as a man or woman begins to mature, they begin to individuate even more into knowing their true self. And this happens like at the age of around 50, where we actually begin to see the constructs that are around us and begin to understand that we are not who we were told we are. And we begin to individuate into our own ideas and into the true person that we are. Some of us don't make it. Some of us, stay in the construct, stay in the chains that we're given. But, others do break away from that and actually find their true self. So that's kind of this idea here, this picture here is the different ideas of the, what in theosophy they would call the subtle bodies. In psychology and modern psychology through Jungian or Freudian psychology, they actually would talk about them as complexes and the shadow and the ego and the persona and so on and so forth. And then we have the collective bodies, which are the collective unconscious and the collective consciousness and so on. Over here, we actually show a picture of the path. We're going to talk a little bit about, as we individuate, what path do we take? Do we take the mystic path or do we take the occult path? And we're going to talk about which one is usually chosen first and which one is chosen second and why. Then we have over here the gene keys. As I said, this is probably one of the most current books we have in terms of what people are studying today. And it has to do a lot with, the first thing you put in order to get your gene keys is your birth date, the time you were born, the location on the earth you were born. And so it's very much based on some of what Alice Bailey had in her treatise on cosmic fire, that we are a product of the alignment of the planetary systems and the energies that were downloaded into us. Some would say that it was at actual insemination and not at the birth itself, but that's, you know, a different story. That's not what the gene keys ask for. They don't have, but maybe they do. Maybe within their program they have it, you know, going back 9 months or whatever. I don't know for sure. I don't know what their algo is they have within their little app. And then we're going to go into rule 4, which is where we actually get into sound, light, vibration, and the form blend and merge, and thus the work is one. It proceedeth under the law, and naught can hinder now the work from going forward. The man breathes deeply, he concentrates his forces, and drives the thought form from him. So this is where we're actually beginning to get into how we manifest the initial thought form that will then become matter and become solid in the 3D realm. So these are the 2 rules we're going to talk about, and these are some of the concepts that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to get into, you know, deeper aspects also, but is there any questions or comments so far of what we've discussed in the collage?
I just have a quick question. Is the spiritual, when you say spiritual, are you referring to the causal plane? Spiritual plane, causal plane, are they the same?
Well, anything outside the physical plane would be a spiritual plane, right? I mean, we do have a causal plane, but when you get back to you know, this idea of the rays, right? We have the Buddhic plane, which is the soul plane. Then we have the astral plane, and so the causal plane is truly that part of you that carries through all incarnations, is your causal body. So it is a makeup of many of your current aspects that you were going to take with you in memory into your next lives. That's your causal body, but that causal body is made up of different aspects of your subtle bodies. And we're going to discuss that a little bit more as we discuss the ray and what is in the personality of the ray.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else? All right, let's move on then. So here we go. Treatise on White Magic, Rule 3. This is going to be in the series 005 on YouTube when we record it. So this is the introduction to the 7 rays. We are dealing with the methods of white magic. And again, to define white magic is magic that comes through the soul, or what Alice Bailey calls the solar angel or higher self. And black magic is defined as that which comes through the personality or the sensing body of desires. So, you know, we have the desires of greed and lust and envy and all those kind of things, is that when we do magic or we do manifestation through those, because I want more food, or I want a different lover, or I want, you know, something that is given to me through my sensing body, that was what we'd call black magic, or black, you know, a black magician. So when we do it through the soul, we do it without the idea of self-fulfillment for our own needs or our own greeds, right? We're actually doing it for a higher purpose, for our solar purpose that is connected with source. So as we begin to concentrate on source, we begin to perform what we would call, or Bailey would call, white magic. Let me remind you also that the magical work of our planetary hierarchy consists of tending the psyche in the world of forms, so that unfolding flower of the soul may be nurtured and fostered in such wise that radiant glory, magnetic force, and ultimately spiritual energy may be demonstrated through the medium of form. Thus, the power of the 3 rays of divine manifestation may be seen. So the idea is that as we bring, you know, through our soul, as we bring these forms into reality, into substance, into matter, if we as a collective work through our souls, the things we will be bringing forth will be spiritual in nature, and be seen as spiritual energy rather than just as matter that is not being focused through the soul. So within that, we have the first ray, which is spiritual energy. We have the second ray, which is magnetic force, and the third ray, which is radiant glory. These rays likewise find their microcosmic reflections, which means the smallest part of them, in the aura of a perfected man. So the first ray is the monadic spiritual energy, and it's head-centered. The second ray is the egoic magnetic force, and it's heart-centered. And the third ray is the personality of radiant glory, and it is the solar plexus. So this differs a bit from kind of the current ideas that, you know, everything is heart-centered to begin with. And what this is kind of saying is that the first ray is really head-centered with spiritual energy, and the heart, we live through the heart, manifest through the heart, but it's also tempered by the head in terms of our ability to see those things that we define as discernment. So we discern with the head what the heart sees as truth and as glory, but we actually may use our head. So this is a bit different than some teachings where it's really just all about the heart. We're actually bringing the head in because the head is where God or source is actually beginning to speak to us first through the knowing, going into the heart, being filtered and being brought forth back through the heart. So the throat center is not included because the center is below the diaphragm. So anything below the diaphragm, primarily the personal lower self, and in their synthesizing center, the solar plexus expresses the magnetic force of the matter aspect in man. This throat center is swept into increasing creativity, activity as the personality vibrates to the soul. So again, we get back to kind of the idea of the Om and speaking things into existence through the throat chakra. We've had previous discussions in our Telegram group about the new language and things that we were going to talk about, how the new language may be used and how it would come through the throat chakra. So again, as this personality, as this lower self, you know, begins to vibrate to the soul, it becomes more soul-centered, we will actually activate the throat chakra and begin to manifest through voice. Any questions so far? Oh,
I like the in the first paragraph about the unfolding flower.
Mm-hmm.
That's a reference to like I lost the word now. Those flowers that float on the
lotus? The
yeah,
lotus?
the lotus.
Mm-hmm.
And it each has these petals, and as we develop ourselves, there's all these petals that will open slowly, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Just different qualities kind of thing. So I like that part, you know, like it's very yeah, we obviously will become magnetic.
And as when Chantel and I actually did the Hape ceremony, and the first one that we did, I could actually feel that kind of heart was like actually unfolding. It was amazing with that tobacco, that sacred tobacco, the ceremony was done. Because as that unfolded, then I could feel it shoot up, you know, to my head and to my third eye. So it was kind of a special experience where I actually felt the heart begin to unfold and unpack.
Was that at Music and Sky?
Yeah, that was in the TP with Sean.
I missed that.
Yeah, it was good. It was it was you were doing your ozone thing.
Well, hey,
I did.
Huh?
Go ahead, Paula.
Something really big. This is just so freaking time. All of this is so timely and so resonant, Will. And I'm having a whole bunch of stuff come up in my throat chakra.
Mm-hmm.
It's been coming up right before I went to Music and Sky. It started coming up, And since then, it's just getting, it's like stacking.
Mhm.
And I think you just said right before you concluded this last little piece, as the soul something or other, then the throat chakra something. But
Well,
did you?
it's your personality. It says here the throat center is swept into increasing creative activity as the personality vibrates to the soul. So if you watch some of the, I don't know which one it was, but the idea is that we have the solar angel, which is our perfect, our idea, our higher self, right? And this is going to reflect back onto the man that's on the ground or the woman that's on the ground, which you might call your straw man and the sovereignty type thing, right? It's your energy body that's being sheathed with food or whatever to become solid, but that's not you, right? That's just your avatar that's doing the work on the earth. So the higher self, as this personality that you have that you think is you or you thought is you for so many years, right? That has the overlays that has been told, Paula is this, by your father, your mother, your sister, your boss, your teachers, whatever. That is not you. That's kind of who you've been told you are. Once that Paula begins to say, I am not that, I am, this, my soul self, it will begin to vibrate and to resonate. And as that does, it will probably go through your throat chakra, which is your manifestation. But you also, it's like where someone might say you're finding your true voice, right? You're actually you're actually finding your voice, and you're not speaking out of the personality. Because what I see so much, and I've done this for myself. I speak out of anger or out of fear or what, and that's not myself, right? That is not the person or thing I want to manifest, but that's my personality. That's the only voice I knew I had, right?
Well, the collective.
Yeah.
That's your connection to the collective is what you're breaking free from.
Well, you're connecting from the overlays that not so much, because there is a collective that also is going to help you and support you.
I don't mean that one. I mean the other one.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the idea of those, like I said, the overlays, the trappings, the matrix, some people talk about, all those things that have kept your voice suppressed. And when you watch, like when you watch the movie Dune or whatever, where Paul Atreides has the thing on his throat where he has, that's really in reference to the idea that how powerful the voice is, and that's what we're going to be beginning to find here in this new age of how powerful our voices are when we work with them through the soul, rather than the personality.
Oh God, this is so timely. I can't even, the synchronicity is going me away.
And again, and this is what, Nikki was working with, right? Where she was actually beginning to manifest through her soul, through her voice. And it's not even like she may have not have known exactly like you said she was doing, but she was channeling almost. She was being, provided this through the idea that she was being used as an instrument at that point. So that's what's kind of happening, in these areas. And so we really kind of have to look at these rays as the first ray is head centered, the second ray is heart centered, and that third ray of the personality is the solar plexus. And oftentimes, when I listen to Eileen McCusick, who does the tuning forks, and I do the tuning fork works, there's a lot of, trauma in the solar plexus within the family. That's where the family area is in the solar plexus. And that's where a lot of that personality is built, right? And so that's where a lot of work needs to be done before we can actually get into the heart center and the head center. We have to actually, get into and break that down so we actually become our true self, because we don't know what's going to come from the heart if we don't deal with the personality first. We can say that we're going to be, from the heart all we want, but what is in that heart, right? What does that heart hold? And this is even the Bible. It says, who can know the heart? It's so wicked, right? Well, that depends on, have you looked at your heart, right? Are you just, becoming emotional with your heart? Do you think that the heart is an emotional instrument? Or are you actually reflecting and curing the solar plexus and that third ray before we begin to initiate the heart into manifestation?
I got the wacko is taking control most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But at least I noticed it.
And then that's the reflection we talked about in rule 1 and 2, is that as that higher self reflects back down on that lower personality self, and we begin to, I think maybe you and I talked about this, Paula, separately, I don't know. But as we begin to reflect back onto that lower self, that, well, you know, just that the personality that's on the ground, right? The man,
Lowest-
the electric man that Walter Russell talked about, right? The sensing body that Russell talks about, that, you know, that's the illusion, right? We think that's us, it's not. So, but as we reflect back, then we can see, oh, like, look at that guy's doing, man, stop that, you know, I'm not going to do that anymore, you know, I don't want to do that anymore, you know.
Fight all day long.
So,
Out of my head.
yeah. And so that's why I think that the idea of, you know, this white magic is good, because it really is going to get us to do a little bit more of that concentration. Any more questions before I move on to the next page? All right. So in the 7 rays, and this is, you know, something we looked at earlier, where it really, you know, drills down in the 7th rays. As Giselle said, it's not the entire, you know, idea of the 7th rays, but it's kind of a representation of how each of these rays has within its own rays, and from that it goes down into all these different planes that we have: the cosmic, the physical, the monadic, the spiritual, the atmic, and so on. And what Bailey talks about in the chapter on Rule 3, she says, students of human nature, and this is all aspirants should be, would do well to bear in mind that there are temporary differences people differ in. So, you know, as we go through our journeys, there is going to be different levels of people's maturity, of where they are on the ray, and this would get back to Russell with where they are on the wave, you know, where they're manifesting on that wave, what, you know, their past has looked like, what their future, how many past lives they had, what they've done in past lives, did they, you know, how far they've come. So the ray, which affects predominantly the magnetism of life, okay, so they can differ in the ray, right? You can be one of the 7 rays. And this kind of gets back to the idea of the gene keys. That's why I brought this up. You know, you have this unique signature based on your ray type. And I believe, I haven't really heard, Gisela said that Dr. Bears talked about this on alphabetic before. I haven't heard of him speak of it lately, but I guess in his practice, this is one of the practices he did with healing, was he actually looked at the ray of each individual person. So so when you say, well, that guy, you know, you're trying to convince somebody, right? I'm trying to convince you it's this way, you know, no, it's this way, it's this way. He's not going to see it that way. She's not going to see it that way. She's a different ray. She's going to have a different idea, but that's what makes the body so unique. As it talked about in the Bible, it says, you know, the hand doesn't say to the foot, you know, walk on me, you know, the hand, the foot, the head, the ear, they all have different purposes, as each ray actually has a different character, right? So we're all brought together to form light, to form matter. And so the idea is that we, you know, shouldn't look at people as being less than because they're different, but embrace their differences for what they are, realizing that they are going to help me get to the next level by completing the spectrum of light. So the other would be the approach to the truth, either the occult or the mystic path, having the stronger drawing power. So there's really the 2 approaches to truth. One's the occult and one's the mystic. Most people will begin with the mystic path, and we're going to talk a bit about that in the next slide. So any questions on that, we'll talk about on the next slide, about the occult and the mystic path. And then we have polarization, deciding the emotional, mental, or physical intent of life. So the idea that, you know, because we're a community, that we're all going to think the same and have the same ideas and goals and aspirations. And if we don't, then you're other and outside. What's going to happen is that you're going to be, you know, a hermit because everybody's going to be a bit different in the way they see all these different ideas and aspects in life. But if we understand that they are made up of these ideas, and if you want to, again, it's kind of gets back to what we talked about at Music and Sky with human design. Very similar concepts within the ray ideas and cosmology of the ray that get back into human design. The next we have is status and evolution, leading to the diversities we see among men. So where are they in their spiritual journey? You know, I am not, I was not, you know, where I am today 4 years ago. I was not where I am today 2 hours ago. Right? I mean, this evolution that takes place as we keep going. And so as we look at somebody that may not be as evolved, it's not, you know, it's not less than, it's just that they're on their path. And sometimes it's good to see that so we can remember where we were, right? So that we actually can see how far we've come or what we forgot. That's another idea too, is that oftentimes we forget what we'd learned along the path. The other is the astrological sign, determining the trend of any particular life. And this is again where I get back to the gene keys. That's the one thing they ask. They don't ask your sign, but they ask your birth date, time, and place. So that's really, that correlates kind of with your astrological sign and that idea, right? That you're born at a certain time in space, in the cosmos, and the energies are fixed at that time that you are incarnated with. And then the race, bringing the personality under the peculiar racial thought form, meaning that, you know, usually not so much now with the United States, but you have to realize that the United States is kind of a unique thing in the last 200 years. You know, before that, everybody was usually, one race was usually born to a certain area, you know, unless you were a slave and taken away. But 95% of the people that were a certain race were born in a certain area and had certain customs and ideas and ways to live because that's the way their world worked. You know, they grew a different way. They planted a different way. They might have different gods. They might have different structures. They might have different social norms, you know, in terms of when to marry and when not to marry, and, you know, who to have children with and so on. So, you know, with this race, I would really say, you know, it's more of like geographical location of where you were born, because that was the tribe and people that you were born into. Any questions on what we talked about with this before we move on to the next slide? Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the occult and mystic past. Now, this is not in the chapter on the third law. It's actually much farther back, but I think it's important to actually discuss this because it was brought up. And so when you see it, it's kind of like, well, why? So, and this again talks about that individualization, as we talked about earlier, and what Jung capitalized on later within his psychology, is this individualization where we are becoming an individual, where we are evolving into a distinct and unique individual. So it says, this I think is in like rule 13 or something, that individualization must cease until man had not only, wait, let me start. At the time the door of initiation was opened, many millions of years ago, okay? We're talking many millions of years ago. The Lodge came to two decisions. So when we're talking about the Lodge, we're talking about the occult schools. This is basically like the White Brotherhood. This is about, you know, those areas that people get afraid of, you know, the Masons and all the different ideas, but that there was a school of knowledge, of occult knowledge, that was kind of, you know, steering man, because they didn't want everybody to have this knowledge because some would use it badly. You know, whether or not that decision was right or wrong is, you know, up to your Ray and the other choices that we talk about in the previous slide, right? But within Bailey, within Theosophy, and within Steiner and all these other occult teachings, there's an idea that there was this lodge that came to two decisions: that individualization must cease until man had not coordinated the physical and astral bodies and could think self-consciously, but until he had also transcended the physical and the astral. When he is becoming group conscious, then the door to the kingdom of self-consciousness will again be opened. So what this is saying is that once we realize that we are not totally just individuated, that we are a part of all. This is back to kind of the law of one. And I'm not saying that the group actually controls us, but that we become aware that we are a part, that we are not outside, that we are a part of every human being out there. That when we see Bill Gates, he is a part of us. When we see Mahatma Gandhi or whatever spiritual teacher you think's the highest out there, that he is a part of us, that we all are part and we all make up this idea of the group. And the idea is that we seek to do what's best for the group, just not the individual, because we know by doing that, we will all transcend. So the idea that we will, once we actually see this group consciousness, then the door to the kingdom of self-consciousness will again be opened. That the path of mysticism must lead eventually to the occult path. So we may start with the mystic path, but that will eventually lead to the occult path. And the plans must be made to impart teachings, and mysteries must be organized, which would reveal the nature of God and all that is seen, and not only in man. So this gets back to some of these ideas that, the Christian church brought forth, that man is, in total dominance, and that, man is the only being that knows God and can feel God and can see God. And we now have to get back to that God is in the earth, God is in the stars, God is in a rock, God is in a tree, which we are moving towards that, but to actually see God in those things, we would treat our world much differently, I believe. And this would be the route to actually beginning to change our perspective on how we see the world and how we treat others and how we actually see the solar system and all those things. And actually, this will actually lead to the idea of divine planning and divinity within ourselves. And that will change a lot within our current paradigm. So man must be taught that though an individual, he is part of a greater whole, and that his interests must be made subservient to those of the group. Gradually, the teaching was reorganized and the curriculum increased. Little by little, the mysteries were developed as the people became ready for them, until we have the marvelous schools of mysteries of Chaldea, Egypt, Greece, and many others. So the idea that these mystery schools flourished in Chaldea, which is where Abraham, was born and was told by God in the Bible or whatever to come out of the land of, the Chaldeans, and then we have Egypt, which is where Moses came out of, and many other, and that's where Jesus went back to after he was born. And we have Greece, where we have Plato and Aristotle and all the great men are there. The thing that we don't have is a current school, right? I mean, it may be said that the internet's the school now, that somehow the internet and what we're doing right now, it is the new school, that those that wish to, come forth, right, and to learn in this manner, that, we have these materials out there. Whether or not, like I said, do I believe in the total personality of Bailey or everything she did? No. Do I think that this is the only path? No. But it's one path, right? And I do believe it's a valid path, because it is getting us to look at how the world may have been formed, how we may have been formed, that we are more than just, blood, bone, and marrow, and that we are actually divine creatures composed of energies that have their own sentience and their own relationship with source, and that we actually have brought this into this resonance in this form we have with our energetic bodies. And so we are very, very powerful creatures, right? We are not, we should not be subject to slavery nor control. Only by our free will should we be subservient to the group, so as what we do will benefit the whole rather than just ourselves, because I know some people say, oh, this is horrible, you know, or it's, you know, group consciousness, it's the collective. It's not it's realizing that we are part of the collective. We're not being told to do what the collective says. Through free will and free choice, we're deciding that we want to help the collective, because if we're not, then we're actually living through that personality only of the sensing body back into black magic, right? And back into manifestation of my own desires and my own will. Now, this whole process is, you know, very painful, right? And it's not easy. And the only way that it's really achieved is by looking at our solar angel and ourself and reflecting back on that personality that's on the ground. What does he need? What is a real, like I said, hunger is a true desire. But when hunger turns into gluttony, right? I need more, I need more, I need to hoard, I need to do all these things. Now we're doing black magic and we're not looking at the whole, right? So go ahead, Doug.
This has to have happened many times before. But
Yes.
It's all in cycles, repeats.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it never happened. She's the way she's saying it, it's like this whole thing is becoming very socialist. Socialist also.
Well, again, she's saying it's over millions of years, right? I mean, and I don't, and she's saying these mystery schools happened in Chaldea, happened in Egypt, happened in Greece, right?
And I believe that too. I believe we're spiritual beings as well, and not these bodies.
Yeah,
but this is just too socialist for me.
Okay, well, that's fine. But again, when you get into it, you're going to hear about Lemuria and Atlantis and all these other things too.
I read all that stuff too.
Yeah, but again, that's what she talks about. She talks about all that. So it
just sounds like a lot of hopium, though, if you know what I mean.
Well, there's nothing wrong with hopium as long as we're actually doing the work in this though too, right? So it's not just hopium. Hopium is when you're not really doing the work, right? So this is not just hopium. I mean, she's saying we got to do this work, right? And when we do the work, I mean, and to actually do the occult path, you actually need to, gosh darn it, you actually need to change your diet, change your lifestyle. I mean, hopium's not that way. Hopium's, the path of the mystic is actually more of an hopium thing where I'm just, concentrating on the monad or whatever source, and I'm not taking care of anything, to really do that. I know that there's knowing, like Walter Russell would say, but do I believe that, in order for me to have greater knowing, am I going to, change my diet, change my thought form, change my way that I live my life? Am I going to do those things? That takes work. And
yes,
so I don't believe that to be hopium. I believe hopium,
these people that, like, when they had some trouble and they went running to the pastor, and kept going to church every week, and the Jesus will save us. That's absolutely not what this is about.
No, this is not about externalizing your God. Externalizing.
Trying to tell them to do something, and they just, God, Jesus will take care of us.
And we're seeing that begin to fail right now. We're beginning to see, and I think maybe Paula said that we're seeing these systems collapse. They're dying, and Bailey also talks about that. She says that, that system is actually an entity in itself. It's actually a sentient being, and it has gotten to a point, just like we get to in our lives, where for us to take the next step, we have to die. We're not really dying, but we are collapsing this system, right? So that we can move on to the next. And that's what Bailey's saying is happening right now, is that this system, the entity of what we've lived in, this total system, has reached a point where in order for it to move on to its next incarnation, it has to collapse. And so that's kind of what we see happening, is then that's why we're seeing this huge collapse, is because this system has reached its lifespan.
What year is this?
What year is this written? Oh, this is written, I think, in the 40s, because it was right after, it's before World War II. I know,
but recently.
yeah, but she I know that she did work with the United Nations, and I think also the League of Nations, a little bit of that stuff with, you know, with what's his name, with Wilson. But yeah, this came after Blavatsky. This came after the breakup with the Theosophy and so on. So we're talking early 1900s, between 1910 and 1940 probably. And she carried on. She carried on. She carried on after that. But this book, I think, was written during that time.
Well, what's his name? By 1950 is when they started. Everything was a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, she's more of a contemporary of Russell than of Steiner. Okay. So the law of being. So this is, you know, something that she talks about, and this comes from the treatise on cosmic fire. And I had to do some research because she actually talks about this law of being later, but I want to briefly touch on the law of being because we're going to talk about it. So this cosmic law, so it's a cosmic law, right? Demonstrating thus in a threefold manner might, for lack of a better term, be called the law of being, and is of a nature so incomprehensible to the infinite mind of man that he can only sense it partially through the aforesaid three branches. Now, the three branches, so the idea of being is that we have mind, right, body, and spirit, right? And so this is the law of being, is what she's saying, is that these are the three things that we have to understand in order to actually become and understand these greater mysteries, is that we have these three bodies and we're not just one or each one. So any questions on the occult and mystic paths? All right, we'll move on. Okay, rule 3, cosmic intermediary. The cosmic intermediary is the term given to the etheric body, which is part and parcel of the universal ether. Let's think about that for a second. What is the ether? Well, the ether is that cosmic material that could almost be seen as, you know, the akasha or the prima materia that makes up all things. So what she's saying here is that the etheric body is part and parcel with the universal ether. The universal ether was disproved, I think, in the, I forget when it was. They did some, you know, experiment that was a false experiment, and they stopped talking about ether. But before that, everyone believed that there was this stuff called ether that all things were manifested from. It is through the... What, excuse me?
Don't we call orgone also?
Well, it could, I mean, orgone is, you know, an energy. I don't know if we manifest through it or if it's just a beneficial energy. I don't know if it's actually the ether. I think the orgone affects the ether in a positive or beneficial way.
I don't know.
It is through the etheric body that all the energies flow, whether emanating from the soul or from the sun or from a planet. All these living lines of fiery essence pass all the contacts that do not emanate specifically from the tangible world. So what we're talking about here is the material world and kind of the spiritual or the energy world, right? There's always energy abound, but if we look back to Russell, not all energy becomes matter. When does energy become matter? Usually when we put our attention on it. Usually when we focus our attention on it. As that wave goes through, we focus our attention at a certain point in time, because we need time to have matter, to have the 3D world. And once we put our attention on that energy, it becomes what some would call a particle, or what Russell called a corpuscle, and that becomes matter. And that's what we see. And that's what we see manifested. But that wave continues on. But we record that instance in matter as a memory. We don't see the continuation of the wave, and we don't see the reverse of the wave. We only see it in the forward motion, as Russell says. So in these two rules, the foundation of the magical work of the soul has been laid down. Let us list, for the sake of clarity, the steps outlined. So these are kind of the steps that we're talking about here for the foundation of the magical work the soul is laid down. 1, The solar angel begins the work of initiating the personality. Again, solar angel, higher self, personality, straw man on the earth. The solar angel is going to begin to initiate the physical, the thinking, the electric man that's on the earth. He withdraws his force from soul enterprises in the spiritual kingdom and centers his attention on the work to be done. So we begin to reflect. We begin to actually look at the work that's ahead of us to be done in order to incorporate this initiation. He enters into deep meditation, right? We become quiet and still, begin to meditate. Magnetic rapport with the instrument in the three worlds is instituted. So we begin to have a rapport with the body, the soul, and the spirit, right? We begin to bring those three together and begin to realize that they're three separate entities that are being manifest, but we begin to have a rapport with that. The work proceeds in ordered stages and with cyclic activity. Now it's it's cyclic, right? It's not a circle. It's a cycle. The light of the soul is thrown downwards. So from the solar angel, the light of the soul is thrown downwards. The light of the vital body and physical form is synchronized with that of the head. So we're talking about the vital body and the physical form is synchronized through the head, which is the first ray, right? We talked about this. The centers swing into activity. The light of the soul and the two other aspects of light are so intense that now all life in the three worlds is illuminated. Alignment is produced, the work of discipleship and initiation becomes possible and proceeds according to the law of being, which is the law that we discovered in the previous slide. Any questions on this foundation for the magical work?
Yes.
Okay. Who said that? Okay.
I'm lost. So the question is, who developed this technology?
Well, it actually,
Because
I mean,
it's very elaborate, right? It's
yeah, well,
extremely elaborate.
and again, it would go back to that slide that we talked about the brotherhoods and the initiation and you know the paths, which
Right.
which is covered supposedly in all these mystery schools, you know, from Chaldea and Greece and you know so on. The funny thing is that Babylon was not mentioned in that group, which is kind of strange, which may mean that I don't believe it's a white magic group. I believe Babylon's the black magic group. So these mystery schools, as what Steiner says, have been around, you know, for many years. And Blavatsky,
For a million, not many years, a million.
yeah,
over
billions,
a million, right?
oh, billions even actually.
Yeah, but they may be switching day and year because they do things like that.
Yeah, they
Maybe
could.
millions of days, not millions of years.
Yeah, but it could be billions of days too, which could be millions of years, right?
Yeah, it just doesn't sound. Could be. I don't
Yeah.
think time is anything from that level, though.
Well, again, time is a construct that we need to have 3D manifestation. So, so the idea here is that this has been set forth that there was some of this knowledge was occulted, which when we talk about occult just means hidden, doesn't mean black or dark. That's black we've talked about is really.
Yeah.
So it's just been hidden, and whoever was the one, you know, at some point in time, not all men knew this, right? I mean, because we talked about that there's different levels of evolution within all men. So there could be a group that first got the knowledge and then maybe they decided, well, we don't want to share this knowledge with everybody because it'd be misused or not understood. Or, you know, and some may have like, and this is kind of the idea of the Amelia's group and the Belial group in Atlantis, is that the Amelia's group was trying to use the two-eyed stone for spiritual growth and to connect with the spiritual realm. The Belial group was trying to use it for control and domination, you know. Now, I don't know if those two groups are true or if they're, you know, metaphorically the idea of what's in all men, but, you know, some within the Steiner and, you know, Bailey world, those are true, that those were real things that happened, that we had these going on. And so in order for us to get to these higher levels of manifestation and of magic, this is the kind of the first initiation. Now, this is only the initiation, right? This is only the thing that first is, this would be like you're just now turning on the switch in a car. Your engine hasn't fired up yet, you know, you're not exhausting, you don't have it in gear, you know, you're just turning the switch on, you know. And so, and because most people don't even understand this, they don't even understand that we have multiple bodies, that we have, and that we have a soul, that we have a, you know, a personality, and that we're trying to work between these two. And you know, when psychology came into being, before psychology was really just religion, right? This was just called, you know, religion, and people, then we began to break away the spiritual side of psychology and just try to explain it through the physical body. And actually Jung broke away from that, not publicly, but personally he broke away from it, and he still preached publicly, you know, the body, not the spiritual side as much. His book, his red book, wasn't published until after his death, which held a lot of this spiritual aspects to it, because, you know, to put yourself out there speaking about this kind of stuff, even, you know, 20 years ago, for someone like me, I would have, you know, I'd probably have death threats, you know, that I'm talking this way. You know, even now I might get some people, you know, saying you're stupid or whatever, or get a job or whatever, but no one's really going to come after me as a death threat. So the idea that this is what we need to do for initiation is not new. It just hasn't been done for hundreds of years.
Can I ask a question to the group?
Sure.
It feels like everything is organically happening inside of me. Space is just opening up. There's more dimension on the inside. I'm seeing more dimension on the outside. It feels like I'm just starting to come online. It feels like the initiation is organically happening through some organic process that's larger than me, that was like predestined to unfold at this time or something like that. I'm just wondering, this all feels so, like I keep saying it, synchronistically, timely. Where's everybody? Is anybody else, like, are y'all starting to just come online? Are you already online? Where are you at in this process?
Same shit here.
What?
Same thing here.
You feel like it's just organically, you're just organically coming online?
Yeah, stuff is coming on crazy. And Dr. Edith even talked about that just actually today, earlier. Yeah, this is a big speed up right now. Things are moving quick, and we're feeling it, and it's good.
Well, I mean, I think we're letting, for myself, I think we're letting go of a lot of things, so new things can come in. I mean, you know, I may have, you know, I guess looked into this for quite a while, but I'm finding that we're connecting with our group, like the right people, I don't know. And also because it's, well, it's cyclic. It says cyclic here. There's times in our lives when we get these opportunities. And right now we were put under some pressure, if you like a crisis point, so that we could grow. And I don't know, I think we're seeing more what we should be doing. I think we're finding what we should be doing. I think I feel like it, like I feel more connected to this group or the work I do with Correlated than, you know, like, you know, there's family, there's all this, but, and they're, you know, on their path, and we all are at a different point, but you're right. Like, we have a lot more possibilities now, I find. I feel it.
That's the collective.
What the way I how can I say this? I feel it's happening organically, but at the same time, when I read this book and I try to understand what is being conveyed, I have the impression that, you know, it's something that is actually directed from what they call the hierarchy. And that's the part I don't understand. You know, like when in Rule 4, they refer a lot to the hierarchy, the different categories of people that are supposed to do the work, you know, the aspirant, and then the initiate, and some people that can be used and other that cannot be used. So it makes me think, you know, I was laughing when I was reading the book, because I was thinking about the talent review process in my former, you know, my former company, and they pick people, you know, the ones that have potential and the ones that are going to be milked, and so on and so on. So that's I really feel it's happening organically, including as far as I'm concerned personally. But when I read this, I'm like, oh, there is a force behind the whole what's happening with me, right? And I actually I don't like that, but but yeah, that's an observation I wanted to share.
And I think that as we talk about this too, I mean, we have to understand that Bailey was from a very strict school of theosophy. That's where she started, and a lot of those ideas of hierarchy and of, you know, brotherhood, where she came from. And we can like it or not, but there is a force and there is control, you know, even like say from the earth itself, from the earth mother, there are energies that are happening that she will find those that will help her too, right? So we have energies that are coming into that are seeking those that are willing and those that are capable. And not all are capable and not all are willing. And we can choose the path that we wish. We can choose the mystic path, which I said is a path that is more of a Hopium path, as Doug was saying a bit, or the occult path, which is a much more active path where we actually begin to, you know, work with our body, get healthier, choose the foods we eat, choose the things we watch, you know, begin to actually realize that we want to do the work. Not everybody wants to do the work, right? That's a whole different issue. Some people just want to eat their Cheetos and watch the latest TV show. Hey, you know,
that's like another energy though. That's what I the collective. It's like this really crazy thing going on with most of the people on the planet that are like just
yeah, and I think
we're on the outside like, what the fuck?
Well, I mean, I probably get 2 to 3 phone calls a day that last over 2 hours of different of different people talking to me about the craziness or what they're feeling, or what, you know, or that they might not even tell me that they're feeling. I can just feel the craziness in them. You know what I mean? I can just feel the frustration. And I was there. I mean, I'd say it happened to me 4 years ago before I got the download of Akashic Intelligence. I was as frustrated as hell, angry as hell, didn't know why, just almost disassociated, you know, felt like I was almost going through a Alzheimer's or some type of, you know, schism, bifurcation of my body and my mind. And not until I really began to focus on the work, right? Focus on these different things, read different things, see that there were these energies, so I could question what came into my mind. You know, is it me or is it some other energy? And began to actually reflect back on my personality and my solar, and really seek the solar ideas. You know, again, I'm no angel, and I'm you know, again, it's the idea of holiness. What is holiness? Is it being pure? Well, what Bailey says, holiness is really being whole. Right? It doesn't really have to do with the idea of good, bad, or good and evil, or that kind of thing, or, you know, I'm a holy roller type person. It means that I am seeking wholeness, meaning that I am beginning to understand that all is me and I am all. And
there's not many to talk about it.
No, and
there's not
that
many other people to talk to about it. There's only,
no,
you know, very
and that's why I get the 2 or 3 calls a day. You know, and that's why I'm trying to make this group available.
That's what come to this thing. That's why I'm looking at Giselle. That's why we're coming here too.
Yeah, exactly. But it all helps me, right? We've all helped each other, right? We've all supported each other. We've all gone on our own journeys and paths. So And like I said, I was, I don't know if I talked about it last week, but I was coming back from Sacramento the other night, and I stopped in Wairika at 11 o'clock to get a bean burrito, because it's the only thing I will kind of eat at Taco Bell. And all of a sudden, the guy jumps out of the car and wants to start a fight with the entire crew at Taco Bell at 11:30, at 30, just talking crazy, you know.
Over a soda or something, over a nickel, or over nothing?
Over nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
and maybe he's on
Well-
drugs or whatever, but I just see this energy that is crazy, right? It is just
He had his dick sewed onto on his cheek, so
Yep.
he couldn't get on that day.
whatever he did. It was, like I said, I just see that we have, and this is the bifurcation that I see, is that there's certain people going into that reality. They're not getting the help they need. And I don't believe it's psychological help, it's spiritual help they need, right? But they got to want to change. They're gonna want to do the work. And if they don't want to do the work and they don't want to do this, then they're not. And they are going to go into a different reality than what the rest of us are. And that is being seen right now.
But why do you think they don't want to do the work?
Again,
Yeah.
it goes back to this slide right here, right?
Yeah, okay, it goes back to the design, okay, and the paths.
Yeah, where
Also,
you know,
no?
what excuse me?
They could be brainwashed. They could be.
Well, again,
over
that,
the
yeah.
they've
Yeah,
frozen in that mode.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, what their ray was, what their approach to the truth is, their polarization, you know, what did they decide
They're
their,
involved.
I mean, all of these things, right? Everybody's going to be at a different level, you know, and that's why when I see people, you know, that are interested in the work, I try to help, right? I reach out to try to help, you know, bring this work forward. That's why, like I said, I had people that didn't really want me to bring the Alice Bailey work forward, I think, in a sense. And, you know, but then when I went to Music and Sky, I saw the hunger, you know, that's all I can say. I just saw a hunger for it from a lot of people.
So crazy.
So, you know, that, so hopefully answers your question, Paula. Is that good for you? Paula?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay.
I think the level of cognitive dissonance that people are under is creating, you know, a breaking point for many.
Mhm.
And I think some people just have to be under, like Giselle was saying, this is a pressure cooker.
Mhm.
And some, I believe there is hope for a lot of people that they will come through this. And especially in these last few years, I mean, we've seen more and more people think in different ways than we thought they ever would. And at the beginning of this, you know, pandemic, people were buying it hook, line, and sinker, and now they're seeing through some of this. Like I said, the wheels are falling off. People are seeing through what's happening because it's just becoming incredulous. Well, we can see it, obviously. Those of us on this path, you know, all those veils have been lifted. We've gone through a long period of going down, you know, some very winding paths and dark places, and, you know, coming into the light on the other side is how I feel it's happening. And like you said, Will, like and for some of us, the distance is just becoming greater and greater from that level, what's happening there.
Mhm.
And maybe it's a different, you know, parallel, or as Jason talks about in Archaics, a simulacrum, you know, that we're the errants, you know, we're creating a
Yes.
disruption in the
Mhm.
field.
Mhm.
I love that guy.
Yeah, and that's what I'm actually, you know, one thing was talked about at Music and Sky was that there was spiritual vortexes being created, you know, and I truly believe that when we get together as a group, you know, that we do create spiritual vortexes that others can come into, and we can actually change our dimensions, change our resonance, and that, you know, when we leave that experience, we actually step into a new reality. And again, that's what I'm trying to create at my places in Southern Oregon and at Eagle Medicine Ranch. Is I'm actually bringing in earth energies and sacred energies to actually empower people with additional, energies to help in that transitions. Because I believe we have to heal the land to also make this transition. That it's a symbiotic relationship.
It's if you listen, it goes both ways. Because like what you were just talking about with Jason, he says it's all a simulacrum, and that it could be fixed just with a little bit of code. So there's there is another side of it, but it still all fits in anyway. Even if no matter how you look at it, it seems to work both ways. And he says that we all have this energy thing, so certainly you'll get together and then you have a bigger energy field.
Exactly. And I think that's where like the group collective, like we talked about, the group conscious can be beneficial. Not that we're all thinking the same thing or, being the Borg, but we're all working towards through the soul, right? For the benefit of the collective. And not that we know, what somebody else should be doing or what's better for them. We're doing what we think, is best for us and also not harming anybody else, right? Any more comments before I go on to, I think it's the last slide for this before we get into, no, we still got some more to go. So this is at the end of the chapter. This is one of the last pages. And it says, an ancient scripture says, seek not, O twice blessed one, to attain the spiritual essence before the mind absorbs. Not thus is wisdom sought. Only in he who hath the mind in leash and seeth the world as in a mirror can be safely trusted with the inner senses. So again, what this is saying is that just because we have spiritual essence doesn't mean that we have the mental aptitude to actually understand what that is, or that we haven't trained our mind to actually get rid, right, of the sensing body, of the personality, and to actually begin to concentrate on this higher solar self, the higher soul self, to begin to bring these things into manifestation. So have that leash, right? Have the mind in leash, right? Have control. Only he who knoweth the five senses to be illusion. Who says that? Walter Russell, right? That's all he talks about. The electric body. It's a total illusion. And that naught remaineth save the two ahead can be admitted into the secret of the cruciform transposed. The path that is trodden by the server is the path of fire that passeth through his heart and leadeth to his head. It is not the path of pleasure, nor on the path of pain, that liberation may be taken, nor that wisdom cometh. It is by the transcendence of the two, of both pleasure and pain, of transcending both, by the blending of pain with pleasure that the goal is reached, that the goal that lieth ahead like a point of light seen in the darkness of a winter's night. The point of light may call to mind the teeny candle in some attic drear, but as the path that leadeth to the light is trodden through the blending of the pairs of opposites. Who talks about the pairs of opposites? Walter Russell. What are the pairs of opposites, right? This is duality. That pinpoint, cold and flickering, groweth with steady radiance till the warm light of some blazing lamp cometh to the mind of the wanderer by the way. Pass on, O pilgrim, with steady perseverance. No candle is there, nor earth lamp fed with oil. Ever the radiance groweth till the path ends within a blaze of glory, and the wanderer through the night become the child of the sun, and entereth the portals of that radiant orb. So what we're talking about here is that we have to transcend the two, right? And that the pain and the pleasure, right, which we could actually look at as good and evil, or as, any duality that we may have, that we have to transcend those two. And Walter Russell talked about this a bit, as he said that there is no evil, only good. that we have to get kind of past the ideas of this duality to actually transcend. And then we will, persevere and find the light that we're looking for. But first, we must know that the five senses to be an illusion, that we must know. And this is something I was telling Paula a year ago. It's all an illusion. It's all, remember that, Paula? It's not real. And that was when she actually really started kind of seeing some things that I thought were really huge. But again, this is at the end of the book, and it talks just a little bit, it's kind of a admonition and a encouragement of walking forward and staying on this path. Any questions or comments on the ancient scripture?
Feels like it was written for me right now. And I'm still struggling with the body thing, Will, because it's like, I love my body, and the experiences that I have through this body are just, I mean, I think that's how I get that this other space is opening up and all this other dimension is opening up. I'm still just like, I need my body. I want my body.
And again, we chose to be in a body, right? I'm not one who's saying that we should leave the body, and I like my body, and I like all that it can do. I mean, I'm learning to take care of my body better now, just because I want to keep it longer and have it in a shape. But all these things, I don't think Alice Bailey is saying get rid of the body. I mean, that it's part of the threefold. It's not just the soul and the spirit, it is the body also. And I think this is where Christianity may have went awry a little bit when they began to say how evil the body was and dirty the body was, and that anything that was physical was of a lower nature and so on, and falling into matter with sin and so on. And so, yeah,
the body's an illusion.
It is an illusion, but it is an antenna. I mean, our DNA, and through the body, as we talked about last week with Lipton and so on, we do have the epigenetics, right? It's kind of like the Akashic record in the 3D, that it holds all the information. It's our data storage bank that we draw from. Yes, because because it has our epigenetics, right? It holds our traumas. It holds all previous ancestral DNA that everybody, our families, experienced from a physical perspective, right? It tells, I mean, our bodies through instinct, what is instinct but a database of what we should do and what we kind of shouldn't do, right? When we should run from lions and stay away from fire. I mean, these are the kind of things that the body has learned, right? And
isn't it like in the cloud more than in the head?
The information, the record of history is in the Akasha. The record of us personally, as a personality, as a unique individual that's individuating, is in the body. So in order to actually, to grasp and understand and to ascend, we have to understand where we came from, what has happened, what has made us today. We can't really, discern where we need to go, who we are, unless we have the database that we have as our body, as our epigenetics, as our chromosomes, as all these things that make us up as a current physical human on the earth. And what did our parents do? What did the previous lives? All these things are held in our body, in our DNA.
That's saying it's physical, though.
What's physical?
The body, that it's something that's matter.
Yeah, but it's also a database. But it will flee, and we will absorb things from the body within our causal bodies that we would need or like to take with us when we go into the next incarnation. We don't take everything with us, but we will take those parts that we believe to be beneficial.
It's an energetic imprint on our crystalline structure.
Yes.
I like that better than the body.
Well, that's great.
I don't see the physical part of it. There's something bigger.
Well, again, like I said, we use it, right? It's an instrument.
I love that you said the body as a database, for the billions of years of, and ancestral you know, we're the whole anthropology of all life forms that have existed in before us is in us. We have access to it through our bodies. I think the biggest thing I'm realizing right now is that I grew up a certain way, or stuff happened early, and I feel like my body doesn't lie, but my mind does. So I have trusted my body, built my career around the body, and bottom up processing. And so what's happening now is there's more of this like head space opening up, this spiritual space opening up. And now I'm learning that actually the body does kind of lie in a way.
Mind and the body are the
I can't base my truth and my spiritual truth and my biggest knowings, gnosis, on the body anymore. And so this whole other, this really is a paradigm shift in a huge way. And it feels like everything is just kind of, everything's turning inside out and upside down. So yeah. I got it.
Wonderful.
I feel like all the thoughts are out there that we're dealing with. You know, like you call them the Akashic database, but they're just all out there.
Okay, next slide. So, you know, as I said, the most current, one of the most current popular books that people have been asking me about is the book, The Gene Keys. And I said that in order to actually get your, what they would call your numbers or whatever, you have to put in your birth date and, you know, the location. So it's very much based on some of the astrological ideas of Bailey. Now, what they do with that, once you put it in, I don't know. But the Gene Keys approach invites us to develop our humility through embodying the 4 qualities that lie at the heart of the Gene Keys. Please consider these values as you navigate the Gene Keys teaching. Contemplation, taking full responsibility for one's inner state. Using everyday challenges for growth and transformation. So instead of like, you know, using them as reasons why we don't get things done or why, you know, we are a certain way or reasons that we can't change because of what has happened to us or what we've experienced, we actually look at them as challenge for growth and transformation. Inquiry, asking the profound introspective questions, inviting wisdom to come from within. Again, this is what Walter Russell says, right? The inner knowing. We're not looking in books or from a teacher or from a psychologist or from a doctor, or from Jesus or something on some God on the outside. We're looking for these wisdom to come from within. Cultivating a state of calm presence in all situations. It's funny, you know, some of these talks I have with people, they'll try to like, you know, trigger me. And they're like, you're not getting triggered, you should defend yourself. And I'm like, I don't think that's, you know, where I want to be. I don't want to be in this constant, you know, right or wrong, you know, fighting, getting off balance. I'll stay in a sense of gentleness, right? And cultivating a state of calm presence in all situations. Because for me, I know that when I get out of balance is when I make bad decisions and say the wrong thing, you know, that when I begin to get out of my calmness, then I am totally in the personality, and that guy's running wild, you know.
Not me, I'm an angel.
A fallen angel.
I got Mr. Hyde or the other doctor in there.
And the next is gentleness, nurturing a kind and gracious approach. You know, I love the word gracious, right? Towards self and others. Encouraging a spirit of unwinding and unlearning versus striving and fixing, right? How many people here are fixers, right? I mean, that's me to a T, right? And I still do. I mean, I can't say I don't. I have a bit of fix to me. That's why I like doing this work, right? I feel like I'm helping some people, right? And then the patience, the cultivating compassion, honesty, and curiosity with an inert trust in the underlying process. You know, one thing that Bailey says too is that within the white magic, within what she teaches, is that there's a plan. And I think Chantel was kind of alluding to this a bit, that there is a plan and that God has a plan, you know, and that plan is for our benefit, right? All things are for the good. And that if we can actually, and this is not hopium, because it's just that it's our perspective. It's a glass, you can look at a glass half full or glass half empty, right? And it's that there is a plan and that there is an underlying process that we need to go through. And that process and plan is for our benefit. Any questions on what I've shared with the gene keys? All right. So now we finally made it to rule 4. Woo! That was a long rule 3, right? So all we're going to do is just review rule 4 for next week. So put this in your meditation, put it in, you know, as what you're going to search for next week, and we'll read rule 4. So sound, light, vibration, and the form blend and merge, and thus the work is one. It proceedeth under the law, and naught can hinder now the work from going forward. The man breathes deeply. He concentrates his forces and drives the thought form from him. It can be said man and it can be said woman, but we talk about man and woman as the same here. So again, the ideas that are being put forth here is sound, light, vibration. These are all the Russellian terms that we talked about in the previous talks about sound and light being the same thing, the color, the tone, right? The octave, and the form blend and merge into the octave, right? And thus the work is one. It proceedeth under the law, and naught can hinder now the work from going forward. The man breathes deeply, right? We get into the patience, right? We get into the idea of stillness. He concentrates his forces and drives the thought form from him. So that's what we'll be discussing next week.
This takes me back to the mention of ether in the previous slide, because the ether is the medium by which all this happens.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, it's the water that we swim in. It's, you know, what we don't see, but it creates all things.
Can you say what and drives the thought form from him?
Mhm.
You mean the thought form that they get we get the thought form and then we bring that out into the world
Yes.
from us?
Yes. As a wave, yes. And that's what begins to congeal and resonate and attract and create our matter. And, you know, and this is really, you know, Walter Russell says that everything's an illusion, and I would almost say that each reality is personal, right? So the thought form that you're sending out is an energy, but it's unique to your body. So, you know, I see you sitting in a chair on a porch. If, you know, that's a thought form I have. That may not be the, you know, you may be on a porch in a chair, but that chair and that porch look different to you in your thought form because of the overlays and antennas you have. But the energy that you're putting forth or what you're seeing, I'm picking up.
I've recently just been like this multidimensional thing I was talking about earlier. I'm on a walk in the beautiful countryside and I'm going, wow, these trees look psychedelic, you know, and I'm straight up. I got nothing in my system, but you know, some broccoli or something, whatever. And I'm these questions are coming up just in the last couple of days. What am I seeing? What am I looking at? Because now it's starting to become it's so vibrant. It doesn't look the same anymore. So what have I been seeing all along, and what's really there? And my vision is changing, and how I'm seeing and perceiving is changing. So it's the questions are organically coming up. What is really there? And if I keep going like this, what am I going to see? What's next?
Well, what I mean, a good example would be Steiner would talk about, like, say, phantom limb pains that somebody has. So once the leg is chopped off, the physical leg is no longer there, but the energetic leg still remains, which means that the energetic form that created the leg is still in place. So what you're feeling is the pain, and you feel that leg is still there, even though what sheathed that leg, which brought that leg into a physicality, is no longer there. So when you look at a tree and you can see the tree, that's really the tree that has been sheathed by the energy of the minerals and things that it picked up in order to actually bring it to a solid form. But underlying that tree is an energetic form that is holding all of this material which we call the sheath, the body, or, you know, what the Buddhists called that man is just a being that has a sheath of food over him. And I think we talked about this in one where it's like when you see the idea of the invisible man, right? And you throw the flower on the invisible man, then you actually see his form, but his energetic form has always been there. So when we eat food or take in minerals or go through these different octaves, or we do have an energetic body that you can pick up on. That's when you see the auras. That's when you begin to see these type of things. There is an energetic, and what, you know, I think Steiner said that, you know, when we were first incarnated, we had an etheric body that was much larger than the bodies we have today. And that's what we actually saw, not so much the physical body. That came later as we got denser and denser into matter. So what you're actually probably seeing is the energy signature rather than the physical signature.
And even in like Kirlian photography, where there's a, you know, organic structure and a part of it is missing, then you still see the vibrational element, the light that makes the whole. It's there.
Wow, thank you so much. That really helped out a lot. Both of you.
Any more questions before we wrap it up for next week? Again, we'll be covering rule 4. I think that one rule a week's probably enough. We'll be talking about that. So I'm going to close off here. This is Will Harold, the Energy Hunter with Akashic Intelligence, the original AI. Please like and subscribe. And thank you to the group. This was a wonderful conversation. I'm so happy that you're all here. You're all are making this a wonderful time for me, and hopefully it's the same for you. So with that, I am going to stop recording.